Yeah, no problem. Good to see you, Matt. Alrighty, we'll go ahead and get started. Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to our annual Performance Report Technical Assistance webinar for our Fund for the Improvement of Postsecondary Education, or FIPSE grantees that are housed under the HSI Division. I wanted to thank you all for taking time to join us today. We know you all have incredibly busy schedules, so we appreciate you spending this next hour with us to learn more about the APR and how to fill it out. I have a lot of really helpful screenshots because I am a visual person, as I've probably said many times to my grantees. My name is Corinne, and I serve as a program specialist in the HSI division and the lead for the Open Textbooks pilot program and the Rural Postsecondary and Economic Development program. I would like to thank my director of the HSI division, Dr. Stacy Slijepčević, and my wonderful HSI division colleagues, some of who have joined today, and a special thank you to my colleague Margarita Melendez, who has kindly offered to monitor the chat for questions. Most importantly, thank you to all of you, not only for taking time out of your day, but for all that you do to support your students and your institutions and your communities, because it takes a lot of really great work to do the work that you do, and we are so appreciative of you and your time today. So as a lot of you know, FIPSE encompasses many grant programs in the Office of Postsecondary Education, but those specifically housed under the HSI division that I'll be referencing here today are the Basic Needs for Postsecondary Students program, which is led by our wonderful colleague Njeri Clark, the Modeling and Simulation program led by our wonderful colleague Dr. Robin Dabney, Transitioning Gang-Involved Youth to Higher Education led by our wonderful colleague Jamie Seward, and then the Open Textbooks Pilot Program and the Rural Postsecondary and Economic Development Program led by myself. If you would like, I know we have quite a few of us here today, so please feel free to introduce yourself in the chat. And I'm just going to go over a couple of housekeeping and technical assistance items. I apologize with the start of spring. My allergies have been unhappy with me, so I might have to take a couple of breaks for a drink of water. So go ahead, feel free to introduce yourself in the chat, especially since we are from different programs under FIPSE. But be aware that we are recording this webinar to post on our HSI Division YouTube playlist. So for any colleagues that weren't able to join us today, we will post the recording on our playlist, and we will additionally send out the slides after the webinar. If you have any questions, please feel free to put them in the chat, and my wonderful colleague Margarita will either answer them in the chat or she'll address them to me during the webinar today, and I'll take breaks throughout. Although I did include a few submitted questions that we received from a couple of our webinars and my grantees. If you have any questions that are specific to your project, we ask that you please contact your assigned program specialist. And if you encounter any HEPA system-related issues, i.e. Trouble logging in, if there's certain boxes or sections that are grayed out, or just general systems issues, please contact the HEPA's Help Desk by clicking the Contact Us button on the main page. I'm going to go ahead and turn off my camera for now so that we can focus on the wonderful content here today. And I already see some great introductions in the chat. It's so great to see all of my grantees and meet all of my colleagues' grantees. So thank you for your time today. So as you all know, the purpose of this webinar and any additional technical assistance is to help you in completing your annual performance report, your APR, for your FIPSE program grant. The APR is submitted through our Higher Education Programs Institutional Service Reporting System, which I have linked here. You should be able to click the link directly from the slides, but I will include that in all the accompanying information and technical assistance as well. This webinar is intended to be used in combination with the email of instructions that came from our HEPA's team, in addition to any technical assistance resources that are available to you on the HEPA's website under the Help tab, which includes a wonderful FIPSE performance report quick guide that HEPA's put together, and that provides an overview of not only the report, but navigating the HEPA system. There's some very helpful login information on, I believe it's the third page of the document. And again, this webinar will also be posted to our HSI Division YouTube playlist, so you can always refer back to this recording, and then we will also send out the slides. So this year, the HEPA system opened on April 1st, and it will close on Friday, May 10th, which gives you about 40 days to submit the report. Only the project director may submit the report. The project director's email address must match your institution's system ending in .edu. So the system doesn't accept yahoo.com or gmail.com emails. Note that you can request access for other project staff. However, we do recommend that you keep this group small. That could be any other grant staff that might help you in filling out the report, your evaluation team, or maybe your grants or budget office. So as I mentioned, the system does typically only allow for .edu emails for security purposes. However, I know we have a few grantees with .org email addresses, particularly those under the RPED program and the Gang Involved Youth program, as we had a few nonprofits get awarded in the past year. So please contact your assigned program specialist if you have any issues creating an account in HEPIS with the .org email address, and we'll work with HEPIS to get you set up. Note that although there are performance measure resources under the Help tab on HEPIS, each report will be individual and pre-populated to your specific program with the correct information, as well as the correct performance measures pertaining to your grant program. For more information about performance reporting and the Uniform Guidance citations, I've included some here for financial reporting as well as monitoring and program reporting. So as I mentioned, I have a lot of screenshots as a visual learner. And so this is the screen that you will see when you enter into the system and access your report. As you'll see on the left-hand side, it has quite a few different sections that you'll navigate through. But it's important to note that HEPIS does have a 30-minute timeout feature, and you'll get a warning if you click OK. It will restart your session. So I encourage you all to save as you go so you don't lose any information. Or if you would like to, you can also fill out the report offline, either using the template that's under the Help tab or a separate Word document, just so you don't lose any important information. Most, if not all of the questions are required, and some questions do have follow-up questions that will only appear when certain responses are selected. So don't hesitate to let us know if you have any questions, and if certain questions don't pop up for you, that just might be because of how you responded to a previous question. So it's not an issue, and we can help you work through that if it is a question that you're supposed to be answering. At the end of the APR, you will be notified when certain sections are not complete, which will be indicated with a red exclamation point. So it will list out all the different sections. And if there is a section that requires a question to be answered or information that wasn't included, you'll see a red exclamation point. But if you do see a green check mark, that indicates that that section is complete. And once you have all green check marks, that's when you can go ahead and move forward to submit your report. Please note that you can upload 3 different attachments, which should be 20 megabytes or smaller, and that could be a Word, PDF, or Excel document. So some of the recommended attachments include your evaluation report, your completed budget template, and your institution's data privacy and security policy, which I'll talk about in a few slides. If you have any additional attachments that you need to include with your report, you can always send those to your assigned program specialist. So on the left-hand side, you'll see the main page for the HEPIS system once you click on that link, hepis.ed.gov. And this is what will pop up, and note under the login button is where you'll request an account if you've never had a HEPIS account or logged in before. But please be sure to include your PR award number in the request so that your grant can be added to your account. If you have an account because you filled out an APR in a previous year, you may need to create a login.gov account, but be sure that the information matches the information that you used to originally create your account last year, just so that those two systems get connected. But of course, if you have any issues, you can always either contact the HEPIS Help Desk under the Contact Us tab, or you can also contact your assigned program specialist, and we'll be happy to help you. There are also really helpful login instructions on this main page and other helpful resources under the Help tab. As I mentioned, the FIPSE Quick Guide has some login instructions that are really helpful. And then once logged in, the screen on the bottom right is where you'll see your grant listed for your APR that you need to complete. And if you click on the Go button, that's when you'll enter the system to begin completing your IPR. So even if you are filling out the APR on a separate Word document or a template, if you are using the blank template, before inputting the information into HEPIS, we strongly encourage that if you're filling that out offline, that you do at least take some time to set up your account and make sure you can access the HEPIS system and your APR just in case that there are any technical issues so that we ensure you have access to the HEPIS system. And that way, when you're ready to fill out the report and input the information, you won't have any issues logging in. Alrighty, so there are a few sections to the APR. As I mentioned earlier, we have first your grant identification page, which has a lot of general information about your grant. We have your cover sheet, we have the executive summary, we have section A, which is your performance objectives and measures, section B, which is your budget information, section C, which is additional information, and then the review and certification tab. So I'm going to go ahead and go into these individually with some screenshots and additional information to support you with filling out each section. Alrighty, so as you'll see here, when you click on the grant identification page, there is a couple screenshots I've included to give you an idea of the kind of information that is included under your general grant information. So on the left-hand side, it has all of your grant information, your PR award number, your program and such. And then there's also a project director information section, as well as an additional contact information section. So most of this will usually be pre-populated, but it's important to fill it out in its entirety if there's any missing information or if you need to correct in any information, that is also an opportunity for you to do so because sometimes the G5 system doesn't always talk to the HEPIS system since they're two different systems, and especially if there are recent changes. So please make any corrections necessary and fill in any missing fields, especially in the name and contact information section. It is required to have project director information, and then you can optionally include an additional contact person. Although that is optional, it is recommended. Perhaps you want to include your certifying official, another key staff member, maybe the project manager, coordinator, your budget analyst, or your grants officer. But it's also really important to note that including their contact information in this section does not create them a new user account. So new user accounts must be requested from the help desk. And a few pieces of the grant identification that I wanted to go into is first off your PR award number, which begins with P116. Of course, we have a lot of FIPSE grants under the FIPSE program from different areas. We have a lot of project directors on the call. So I've outlined some of the different letters that follow P116 that you'll see. So for N, that refers to basic needs. So you will have P116N and then your award year. S refers to modeling and simulation. T refers to the open textbooks program. W refers to the RPED program. And Y refers to the transitioning gang involved youth program. Under that is the program that you'll enter. So your basic needs, modeling simulation, open textbooks, RPED, or gang involved youth will go in that section. You'll also include your grantee name, address, city, state, and zip code, your project title, which is a unique name you gave to your project in your application, your institution type, whether that's 2-year, 4-year, public, private, your grant type, which is most often individual development, and then you just want to make sure your grant and report information is correct. There is your grant award year included, your reporting period, your grant end year, your program specialist, and the total duration of your grant. So again, just make sure all of this information is correct and let us and fill out what you can, make changes if you're able, but you can also let us know if there's any issues. I think I did I saw Jackie, what if our project director can log into HEPIS and can see other grants such as Title V, but the FIPSE is not showing as listed? Yeah, that is a wonderful question. I think Margarita might have answered it as well. But if you log into the system and you don't see your FIPSE PR award number, go ahead and you can do both. You can let us know as your program specialist, but you also could contact the HEPIS help desk under the contact us tab because we want to make sure that your PR award number for the FIPSE grant gets added to your account. Um, I'm just reading your questions in the chat. I'm taking a pause before I move on to our cover sheet. We were advised that our program specialist listed on the GAN was no longer the program specialist, and the person she indicated to us also seemed to be unaware of our grant. Is there someone else we can copy? Yeah, Jackie, you can go ahead and email us at HSI Division newsletter at ed.gov so we can point you in the right direction and get you support as soon as possible so that you can access the APR. I'll go ahead and put that email in the chat. And that is HSI newsletter at ed.gov. And we'll make sure to get you all of the information. Jason, the grant identification information for our grant is wrong. Who do we need to speak with to correct this? Yes, so you would go ahead and if you are able to correct that information on your end, then you can definitely do so. Although, Jason, I know you are one of my grantees, so that is something that I've already let the HEPIS help desk know about because the G5 system doesn't always talk to the HEPIS system, so I've let them know that there need to be some changes to your grant. Alrighty, so let's go ahead and move into our cover sheet. As you see, there's a screenshot here with some very helpful information to give us an overview of your grant, your budget expenditures, your indirect cost rate, as well as a few other pieces of information. So this is what the cover sheet will look like. I'll go ahead and go through each individual question. And question 1 will be your budget expenditures. So for the purposes of the report, the term budget expenditures are all of your allowable grant obligations that you incurred during your reporting period. So the period that you're reporting on, which you'll see in your grant, in your APR, that is all of the budget expenditures within that time frame that you'll include there. And you'll include that in the federal grant funds box. You'll enter your actual budget expenditures for the reporting period, not what was approved. So everything that you drew down between that start date and end date of the reporting period. And actual expenditures include funds drawn down from G5 and funds encumbered, but not drawn down from G5. So I know that sometimes our grants are on a different schedule than the fiscal year. So anything that you drew down during the project year, but was not able to draw down after that project year ended, you would include those funds as well. So anything that you still needed to invoice and draw down from G5. For budget expenditures made with federal grant funds, you must provide an explanation in Section B, which is our budget information section, if you have not drawn down funds from G5 to pay for these budget expenditures. And I'll go into that in more detail in a few slides, and that's also why our budget spreadsheet template is also really helpful, because although you will include an overall budget expenditures number in this section, it's really helpful to go into detail about your spending in each line item. You would report any non-federal funds that you spent in the box non-federal funds, which include any required or voluntary matching funds, which are dependent on your specific program. So please check with your assigned program specialist. And then there's also some really helpful information on matching funds in our uniform guidance citations, which I've linked here. Alrighty, so the next question 2 is indirect cost information. If you are charging indirect cost to the grant, you would indicate yes, which I believe most of our grants here have a indirect cost rate. If you're not charging an indirect cost rate, then you would mark no, because I know some grantees did not opt to assign an indirect cost rate. You would refer to your notice inviting applications for specifics on charging indirect cost rates, although there's really helpful information that can be found at this link here. I also want to point out that our wonderful indirect cost division is our experts on indirect cost rates. They know all the ins and outs and can support you with any questions you might have about your indirect cost. So if you don't mind, if you have any questions, you can always email your program specialist, but they are also really helpful as well. And their email is indirectcostdivision@ed.gov. And I'll go ahead and put that in the chat. Generally, our FY 2021 grantees and any grantee that was funded down the slate from the FY 2021 competition in FY 2022 had a 8% restricted rate. And then any other grantees that were under the new competition in 22 and 23 fell under an unrestricted indirect cost rate. So of course, we are always happy to help you, to support you with that section. But again, our indirect cost division is also wonderful. And I did include a screenshot here of what that question looks like, because once you click yes to indicate that you do have an indirect cost rate, it will pop up with additional questions and information for you to fill out. So if you clicked yes, then you would fill out a few pieces, which is the agency you have an agreement with, if you have a negotiated indirect cost rate, the beginning and ending dates covered by the indirect cost rate agreement, and your rate and type of rate. And that is if you have a negotiated indirect cost rate. However, there is also a section for you to fill out if you have a restricted indirect cost rate. And then the next three questions are our human subjects question, our data privacy and security measures certification, and our performance measures status and certification. And as you'll see, you'll have that upload file at the bottom so that you can upload any attachments that are necessary, those three files. And then I would also email any additional attachments to your assigned program specialist if you run out of room in the three files. All right, so question 3, as I mentioned, is your human subjects or IRB certification. If you are conducting a research study, you may be subject to those requirements, but I would discuss that with your program specialist because it can be either institution specific or grant project specific. But you can also check with your institutional policies and procedures. And for additional information on human subjects, you can see our human subjects program webpage, which is linked here. And there's also a really great training online for external users on human subjects. They also have a really great list of other trainings. So in addition to this one, they have a lot of pre-recorded trainings that could be helpful to you all. I know they have one on allowable costs and activities. They have one on grants administration, indirect costs. So in addition to the human subjects training, they also have a lot of other really great trainings as well. If you do have an IRB, if you are subject to the requirements, then you would select yes. If you are not subject to the requirements, then you would check no. Alrighty, and then the next question, question 4, is our data privacy and security measures certification. So as a new grantee, you must check yes to affirm that you're aware of and in compliance with all federal, state laws and regulations regarding system security and the protection of personally identifiable information, which should be supported by a summary of your policies and procedures. You can also upload an attachment just to ensure compliance with the data privacy and security regulations. So that will be one of your attachments you upload to your APR, and you can provide a copy of your IHE's data security and student privacy policy. You can either include it as an attachment, or if it's too lengthy, if you don't have a PDF document, you can also include a link just to make sure that the link is live. And then question 5 is our performance measure status and certification. Please check yes or no to indicate whether complete data, i.e. all of the data that you have collected or anticipate to be collected on performance measures for the current budget period are included in your report in section A of the project status chart. So for most of you, since this is your annual performance report, you would likely check yes and provide an explanation in the appropriate narrative boxes in section A. For any context needed to understand your measures data. If you do check no, perhaps you don't have baseline data, or perhaps it's a final performance measure. I know that's common with some of my grantees, or if an activity isn't slated to take place until later, you can check no, and then you would want to let us know when that data will be available, as well as the anticipated date and additional information about your progress towards achieving those objectives. So I highly recommend that if there is sections where you don't have data available, or it's not an activity or objective that you anticipate to take on until a later time period, that you follow up with your program specialist to provide that information. And then I also encourage you to provide as much information about that as you're able under each of the associated objectives. All right, so the next section is our executive summary. I like to call this section the Tell Your Story section, because this is just the really great narrative piece where you can talk about your experience with implementing the grant, your impact at your institutions, your accomplishments. This is really where you can tell your story about what you've been able to do over the past year to achieve your goals and objectives. I do recommend that it should be only about 1 to 2 pages in length and provide a general overview of all of your project and your accomplishments. So you can briefly restate your goals and objectives. You can discuss your progress toward project implementation over the last 12 months. You can also discuss any challenges you've encountered and strategies for overcoming those. I also love this section, and I encourage my grantees typically to let me know if there's anything else I can do to better support you. And most importantly, I love to celebrate the wins. So please list your major accomplishments, and you can do this in a bulleted form. Perhaps you've undergone hiring, you've gotten hiring set up, perhaps you've done outreach, perhaps you've had certain very successful programs take place. Anything that you think you would like to include here to discuss your progress over the past year, then that would be really helpful to include there. And again, why I call it our Tell Your Story section. But also please consider that most, if not all of our program specialists are reviewing 75 to 100 plus reports. So it's also important to be clear and concise, and not to cut and paste from your application, but to just give us a good overview of the impact at your institution over the past year. And I've also included that information here with every screenshot. The next slide usually has all of the information that I just talked about. So you can always refer back to that during when you're filling out your APR, and then you can also refer back to our recording. So I'm going to go ahead and pause and look at the chat. I know we got quite a few sections. In just one moment while I take a drink of water. Thank you again to my wonderful colleagues supporting our grantees in the chat. I just want to make sure I didn't miss any questions. I see Margarita answered some. Thank you so much, Margarita. And I think maybe Margarita might have answered this, but Matt asked on the grant identification page when you can add additional contacts, will these individuals also be able to edit and add content to the APR? That's a great question. So once you put their information in there, it doesn't create an account for them automatically. So it's important to contact the HEPIS help desk to make sure that they get added to your APR so that they can fill out and edit the APR as well. Please be sure that they add your PR ward number so that it gets added to their account. And then I'm just checking the chat. And yes, Jackie or Jacqueline, we are happy to help you get support on who your program specialist is and help you with the APR. So don't hesitate to email us at hsinewsletter@ed.gov because we want to make sure that you get access to the report right away. Angela, for budget expenditures for the current budget period, do we only report for the time period listed in the grant identification, or should we report until present per instructions through 30 days before the due date of this report? So generally, I would focus on the expenditures that you've expended during the reporting period. You can discuss the expenditures that you've included up to the reporting period, but your APR should generally just focus on that reporting period because when you go to fill out the budget expenditure template that I will show you, I have a screenshot of, it will talk about only the general reporting period that you are reporting on. It'll ask you a little bit about carryover from the previous year, the current budget period, and then carry over into your current project year. Adam, would we need to include MOUs in place with partner institutions for the data privacy piece? So you wouldn't include MOUs in place of that. You would want to include your institution or organization's privacy policy. But I do see Margarita has her hand raised.
Hi, Karen. I just want to make sure that I'm not confused. I've had a long day already, but Michelle is stating that they won't be able to get final financials in time by March 31st, but they're reporting on the previous year. So the year that ended, for many of them, it will be September 31st or whenever it was, they'd need to check their GAN. So they should have those final financials. Am I understanding this correctly, Karen? I think that is the case.
Yes, exactly, Margarita. So you only are reporting on your previous project year, not the current one. So for a lot of you, that might be January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023. Or I know some grantees are on that October 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2023. So you're only reporting on the expenditures, and that's why I encourage only the expenditures from that reporting period, not your current project period. That way you will have all of the final financials to be able to provide in that report. And I also encourage you all to work with your budget office because they might be able to provide you all of that information so that either you can put that into the APR, or I know some budget offices or financial analysts like to fill out that portion themselves. So I would just work with them and see if they can provide you all of that information. And I'm just quickly scrolling through the chat just to be sure that I'm not missing anything. Yes, that's a great point, Susan. There is a character limit in some sections, so it's important to also keep that in mind, especially if you're filling out the report offline, either with the template or on a Word document. There is that character limit for a lot of sections, so just be sure that you are aware of the character limit when you go to put that information in the system. Yes, so most grants, and I believe all of the FIPSE grants are individual uh, grant applications. Yes, I know, and I know my OTP grantees are very specific with the reporting period because our reporting was a little bit wonky last year. So it is the start date of your previous report to the end date of your last project period. Alrighty, so please let me know if there are any other questions or if I missed a question. I apologize. I was trying to go through the chat and make sure I got everyone's question, but please continue to put questions in the chat and we'll go ahead and move on to our performance objectives section. So please note that you must report on the performance measures that are specific to your program as outlined in your notice inviting applications. And these are pre-populated for you to the report for your specific program. So although the screenshot here lists numbers 1 through 10, it will depend on your specific program and how many performance measures were listed under your notice inviting applications. I've also included slides with all of those performance measures that you can refer back to, although I recommend that you also talk to your program specialist. And again, these will be pre-populated for your specific program, so you won't have to worry about inputting these. You'll see the associated program measures listed for your APR. And that's not to say you won't have additional project-specific measures that you wrote into your grant application, and you can include those in your report as well. And perhaps your project-specific measures align perfectly with your program measures, but if they don't, you can also include them in that other section. And again, as you'll see, each number corresponds to a program measure from the notice inviting applications, and the other section is where you'll include all of your additional project-specific measures that don't fall under those sections. And as you'll see here, once you fill out each section, you'll have a green check mark that shows when you have entered information in those sections, and then you can move forward. And with each performance objective, each section should have at least one objective and one associated performance measure, and you should indicate in each of those sections the activity or activities that are aligned to those objectives, what data you collected, whether quantitative or qualitative, when you collected that data, and the evaluation methods that were used, and how your data was analyzed. It's also really important to clearly identify and explain any deviations from your approved evaluation plan, including changes in either the design, the methodology, or your evaluator. And I encourage you to work with your evaluator on this section. You will discuss your findings or outcomes, including information to show whether you're making progress towards meeting each objective. And you may not have complete data and evaluation information just yet, especially if you were filling out your first APR. Or for, I know a lot of my grantees, we have final performance measures, but you can indicate how you used your data and information from your evaluation to monitor the progress of your grant, and if needed, to make improvements to your original project plan. Perhaps those were changes or improvements to your activities or milestones, as long as they're consistent with your overall scope of your grant and your goals and objectives. And if expected data was not attained, or if expected progress wasn't made towards meeting a certain objective or performance measure, or if a planned activity wasn't conducted as scheduled, if there were challenges or delays, it's really important to provide an explanation and a description of not only what has occurred, what you've undergone as far as maybe perhaps some of those challenges or delays, but also how you're pivoting. What are the steps and schedules? What are the steps and the schedule you are using to address that problem or issue and overcome that? So as I mentioned, there are program-specific measures assigned to each individual FIPSE program. I do recommend that you work with your program specialist, but these are all pre-populated for you in your APR. I've also included them here on the slides. I won't go into detail about each individual performance measure, but you can also find these on your notice of writing applications, and then we'll also send out the slide deck after the webinar. So I have listed here the 4 performance measures for the basic needs program. We also have the 2 performance measures for the modeling and simulation program. We have the 10 performance measures for the open textbooks program. We have the 4 performance measures for the RPED program, our rule program. And then finally, the 3 performance measures for our gang-involved youth program. So again, these are in your notice of writing applications that you need to respond to as far as program-specific measures go, although you might have project-specific measures that speak to those, and you can include that information and data under each of those different tabs. And as you'll see here, when you go to enter a objective and performance measure duo, you'll go ahead and click add objective performance measure, and then it will pop up with more information for you to include. So it'll generally follow that hierarchy of adding an objective and then a performance measure and a associated performance measure data. And you'll see exactly how to fill out this section when you go to enter that information. So you'll include your objective narrative, what is the narrative associated with that objective, what is important for us to know. And then you'll see a few more pieces of information, such as your objective status. Is it on schedule? Is there a change in schedule? Is it completed? You'll see the measure type, which is program or project specific. You'll see how often you measure that. It could be semester or annually. You'll see the data type, which is usually a raw number or a ratio or percentage. You'll see the date last measured, and then you'll see target data, which is what you said you would accomplish in your application, and the actual data, which is what you achieved in the current reporting period. It's important to note that you should measure your objectives using the same format that you discuss in your application, or if you've discussed any changes with your program specialist, you should follow the most recently approved evaluation data. And this is just a screenshot of what the bottom of that piece looks like. So again, you have how often do you measure that, you have the data type, you have your target data, and then you have your actual data. And then most importantly, you also have the explanation of progress. So this is a very important piece for you to go into detail about not only what you've accomplished, the type of data you collected, the activities it's aligned to, when you collected it, and the evaluation methods you used, but also if you didn't meet the objectives as intended, or if you don't have data at the time, you can provide additional narrative in that section. And again, it does follow a hierarchy. It does go objective and performance measure. However, you can add additional performance measures under each objective as long as you have that first piece of the objective performance measure duo. And then you can add additional performance measures or go in to add another objective and performance measure duo to your overall report. And I've included all of that helpful information as well from each section so that you have that for reference. Again, your objective status, your measure type, how often you measure, your data type, the date last measured, your target data, your actual data, and then again, just making sure that it's the same format as what you have discussed in your application. Now, I wanted to talk about very briefly baseline data because some of you might have established some baseline data in your overall evaluation plan. If you have baseline data for a performance measure, you would want to follow a certain procedure so that it could indicate to your program specialist that it's baseline data. Although it is okay not to have baseline data, especially if you're in your first year, I would recommend working with your program specialist to discuss the type of data you're including and if it's baseline data or not. So that's usually if you have not set targets in the first budget period. So when you go to enter baseline data, you would put 999 in the target box, and then you would put the actual data in the actual section to indicate that that is baseline data. And baseline data is also great because that's a good foundation for how you're measuring growth from year to year. Again, that 999 in the target box indicates to us that baseline data either is collected or is being collected during your first project reporting period, and that targets have not been set. And again, you do want to talk about this in further detail in that explanation of progress section and give us more information about your progress towards collecting that data, especially if it's baseline data or if you haven't met certain objectives and you have a 0 in that section. So again, that box below the explanation of progress, it's where you'll include any and all information to discuss your progress towards meeting your objectives. So your progress, your findings, your outcomes, deviations or changes from your original evaluation plan, or delays or challenges. And associated with those delays or challenges, any improvements or what plan you have in place to address the problems or issues. So once you've added your first objective and performance measure, you can go ahead and add an additional objective and performance measure. I apologize, I think this screenshot is a bit blurry, but once you save your first objective and performance measure, you would go ahead and follow the previous instructions for all additional objectives and performance measures. So you would go ahead and click that box at the bottom, which is click add an objective and performance measure to get you started. So as long as you have at least one objective and one performance measure to begin with, you can go ahead and add some more. After you've saved your first pair, you can add additional performance measures to an objective, add another duo, but you should strive to ensure that all prescribed categories are represented by the work being performed on the grant. So I always encourage grantees to put all of their objectives in there, even if you don't have data available just yet. However, if you don't have information in there, you will be able to submit your report even if all the categories are not addressed. Typically, you do have to address at least the program measure sections, but the other section is optional. And that's only if there is an objective performance measure that doesn't fit into one of your program measures in the other sections. You can go ahead and put your project-specific measures into the other section. However, again, it is optional and it's there for your convenience if you need to add additional project measures. I do recommend that you save each section as you complete it, just so you don't lose any information and all the hard work that you put into the APR, and you can cut and paste either from your application or your evaluation report to help complete this section. And that's why I recommend working either with your institutional research office or your evaluator, like maybe you have an internal evaluator to help you fill out this section. And again, if you have any difficulties with the navigation or formatting in the HEPAS system, you can always reach out to the HEPAS help desk, and I have have included their link there to the Contact Us page, but you can also email us as your program specialists. And then I'm going to go ahead and pause there before we move into budget information so I can see if we have any additional questions in the chat. Liz, if our project started 9/1/23, what is our reporting period? We don't follow the calendar year or the federal fiscal year. Yeah, so you would refer to your project year in your grant award notification. So if you started on September 1st, 2023, that would probably mean that your end date, that's your start date, and your end date would be August 31st, 2024. And noting that you have a 2023 start date, you will likely not be filling out an APR this year since you just started. But just to note that that September 1st date is your start date for the reporting period, and that will go to August 31st, 2024. How soon will we receive the pre-populated forms before actual date of the APR? So that is your APR already pre-populated with your performance measures. So that should already be included in your APR when you access the system. However, if you have any issues, you can always contact the HEPIS help desk, or you can also contact us, your program specialists. And I'm just going through and reviewing the chat. I want to make sure I get everyone's questions before I move on to budget information. Will we want to include all of our grant performance measures that don't fit into the pre-populated sections, even if we haven't yet collected data or if the activity is planned for a future year? Or would we wait until the next year's reporting to include this? So I usually recommend to include all of your objectives and performance measures, just in the case that typically our APRs pre-populate from year to year, so you won't have to go in and redo any of that information. So I would include all of your objectives and performance measures, and also to discuss your progress towards meeting certain objectives, even if you haven't collected data for it just yet, or if you can let us know that you are planning to implement that activity and collect data in a future period, just so we have an idea of where you're at and what you're planning moving forward and how best to support you. Adam, going back a bit, mentioned working with an evaluator. Is that person the same as your program specialist? So typically, grants have an evaluator. Sometimes it's an external evaluator that you work with, or perhaps you have an internal evaluator. A lot of institutions have someone, an internal evaluator that they hire for the grant, or perhaps you're working with your institutional research office. So it's important to note who your evaluator is and to work with them to help you fill out this report. I think Margarita answered that question. With a 30-minute timeout, it sounds like it auto-saves. Yes, it should auto-save, but I always recommend to grantees to save all that information in a separate place, just because I know a lot of work and time goes into these reports, and I don't want you to lose any information in the case that it doesn't save. So I recommend manually saving it as well, and maybe also keeping your information in a separate place like a Word document. Alrighty, I think we addressed all of the questions. I think we can go ahead and move forward. But again, if I missed anything, because I see Margarita has responded to them, don't hesitate to let me know. You can continue to put questions in the chat, and I'm happy to answer them. But we'll go ahead and move on to our budget section. Alrighty, so this is the budget section. This is section B, and this is where you'll provide an accounting of your complete budget by line item using the FIPSE budget and expenditure template. So that is linked there in your APR, so you can download that and fill that out, and you would upload that as an additional attachment. And this is really helpful because this gives us an explanation for all of your budget expenditures from the total that you included on the cover sheet. And then additionally, in addition to filling out this template, and I recommend working with your budget office on this, you would also respond to some questions in the narrative box below that. And some important information to include there is perhaps if you've had any delays in spending funds, if you haven't drawn down from G5 as intended, if there have been any significant changes to your budget, maybe that resulted in changes to activities, and maybe there's any changes to your budget that have affected your ability to achieve your goals or objectives or carry out your activities. Maybe you had delays in hiring, maybe you weren't able to implement certain activities according to the timeline you intended, which affected the budget. Any and all information related to your budget that you can include there, especially delays and changes and challenges, you can include in that narrative box. And that one does have a 4,000 character limit, so provide as much information as you can to explain, especially if you've had delays and challenges, but then you would also fill out that budget and expenditure template, which gives us an overview line by line of each of the sections of your budget. So if you remember when you filled out your grant application, or perhaps you've referred back to your grant application and seen that Ed 524 form, those are the line items that you'll also see in the budget and expenditure template. However, as a visual learner, I have also included a screenshot of what that looks like. So you'll go ahead and fill this out and upload it as an additional attachment to your APR. Although your funds were front-loaded for our FIPSE programs, meaning you received your money for all project years up front, you'll generally want to follow the annual budget you outlined in your grant application or any approved changes that you've discussed with your program specialist. So a few sections that are included here are your carryover balance from the previous year. For all of our grantees that are filling out their first report, you would likely have a 0 in this section because you haven't reported on a previous year. You would include your approved budget, which is the year you're reporting on, which is your previous project period, your total, which is carryover plus your approved budget, your expenditures, which is where you'll outline line by line what that total was that you included on the cover sheet. If you had non-federal expenditures, which is those matching components, whether voluntary or required, you'll discuss that there. And then you'll go ahead and fill out the carryover balance, which is anything that you didn't expend in your project year that you're reporting on that you carried over into the current year and the current year's actual budget. So I will go ahead and provide the slides to you all with all of this information because I have outlined it and included it on the next slide, just so that you have access to this and you can refer back to it, because I know there's a lot of ins and outs, especially with that template. So I just want to make sure you have all that information. So this first slide talks about what I just mentioned as far as discussing delays and challenges and changes to your budget. And then the next slide goes into each of those individual columns of your budget report template. So you'll be able to refer back to this to fill out the budget section. And then, of course, any questions that you have, please discuss that with your program specialist. Juanita, that's a great question. Can you share the budget and expenditures template? You should be able to access that when you go into your APR. It should be a link where you can download your template. However, I can also include it as a resource when I send out the slides. And then we go into our final section, which is section C, our additional information section. And this is where you want to add any additional information that wasn't discussed or provided in the previous sections. Perhaps you want to talk about presentations that you've given, newsletters, websites, media articles. Maybe you want to go into more detail about your formative evaluation results, celebrate your wins, anything that you haven't discussed in your previous sections, you can include that here. But you also might want to discuss your current partners and stakeholders on your grant and their contributions to the project, any approved changes that you've made to your grant that you haven't discussed in the previous sections. Maybe there was unanticipated outcomes or benefits from your project and you want to celebrate those wins, or perhaps there's additional challenges or delays you may be experiencing. So this is also a great section if you need any additional support, especially if you're experiencing challenges or delays. You can outline that here so that we know best how to support you going forward to overcome some of those challenges. And then I do want to note, although the report instructions do indicate that you can add information for requesting additional changes to either your activities or your budget, we do recommend not using the APR to do so because, again, we are reviewing about 75 to 100 plus reports. And so we want to make sure that we get those changes separately so that we can work with you to discuss those changes, or in the case that we need additional documentation. I would recommend contacting your program specialist separately to discuss any of those changes to your project. And I've included all that information here so that you can refer back to it at a later time. And then once you are all done, you will get taken to our review and certification tab. When you review the sections, each section should have a green check mark next to it. And as you note here in the screenshot, occasionally you might have a red exclamation point. If you do have a red exclamation point, that means there is incomplete information in one of those sections and you need to go back and fill out what might be missing. But if you have all green check marks in this section, that means you are good to go. You filled out all of the report and you can then move on to your certification tab. The certification tab allows you to enter your information as the project director because you as the project director should be the one submitting the report. So you would enter your name and contact information, and this serves as an electronic signature and is automatically recorded by our HEPIS system. So you just want to be sure to include your name, your email, your phone number, and the date of the signature. So that notifies when you signed and submitted this. And this signature certifies that all information on the report is true and correct to the best of your knowledge and that you are submitting it as the project director. And then once you go ahead and fill that information out, you can go ahead and submit your report. And once you submit your report, you will be able to download a PDF copy of your report. And I would recommend that you save that for your records. You might also want to provide that downloaded report to any additional contacts at your institution or organization. Maybe you want to provide that to your certifying official. Perhaps you want to give that to your budgets office or your grants office. You can download the report, save a copy for your records, and distribute it as needed. And then just some reminders and tips. So again, we understand that you may not have all the necessary data to report on, but provide all the data that you do have, as well as an explanation of your progress towards obtaining that data and achieving your project goals. Where you've encountered challenges or delays, it's important to talk about that explanation of why you're encountering the challenge, why there might be delays. Perhaps there's delays in hiring, which is expected with a lot of our grants. And then also you want to discuss the steps you are taking to overcome those challenges and follow up with your program specialist if you need any additional technical assistance or support so that we can help you. You want to make sure your budget information that you include aligns with your drawdowns in G5. So again, working with your budget office to complete the budget section, and then your program specialist can verify that information against your G5 account. Again, the APRs will be signed and certified electronically by the project director. And again, you want to make sure to keep a copy of your APR and perhaps provide it to the necessary individuals, your certifying official, budget office, grants office, and any other offices that are involved with your project. Again, if you have questions about the system, if you have an issue logging in, you need access to change your password. If you have formatting issues, you can definitely contact the HEPIS help desk at the contact us button here, or you can also email them at hepis.helpdesk@thetactilegroup.com. If you have any program-specific content information or issues that you would like more guidance on, I recommend that you contact your assigned program specialist so that we can best support you. And briefly, as I mentioned, I have a couple of submitted questions that I just wanted to go over to give you additional guidance. So I know we've talked a little bit about the reporting period, and so to clarify just a little bit, your reporting period that you're reporting on for the APR is your most recent project year, which for most of you might be January 1st, 2023 to December 31st, 2023, or perhaps you were on the October 1st, 2022 to September 30th, 2023 timeline. If you're unsure, it should be listed on your APR, but you would also talk to your program specialist if you have any questions or concerns about what the reporting period states. You can also find your reporting periods on your grant award notification. Yes, Njeri.
Thank you, Corinne. I've been getting some emails during the presentation from my basic needs grantees who were just awarded in September of, or was it October of 2023. You are not required to complete your APR in this cycle. Your first report will be in the next cycle. I just want to confirm that for any of those grantees who are on the webinar. Does that make sense, Corinne?
Yes, thank you so much, Njeri. I know I invited a lot of the new grantees, and this is mostly, I forgot to mention at the beginning, so I apologize. I invited a lot of you to, as informational purposes, so that you can get an idea of what the APR looks like for when you do fill out your APR. But if you were just awarded on that January 1st, 2024 date, you are not filling out an APR this year. You will be filling out your APR next year. Thank you so much, Njeri.
You're welcome.
Alrighty, where do I find the performance measures for my grant? So your program measures that I mentioned earlier are found in your notice inviting applications under that section, Award Administration. Your program specialist can also provide you a copy if you need access to it. And you would also want to report on your objectives and performance measures that you wrote into your grant application, which are your project-specific measures. So again, I recommend working with your evaluator or your institutional research office to make sure that you have all that data to provide in the report. What if we need to change, modify, or add a project objective or performance measures? So I recommend working with your assigned program specialist if there's any changes that you need to make. What happens if our data is qualitative? I know some of our grantees do have qualitative data. Maybe you've done focus groups or surveys. So if your data is qualitative, you would still mention your objectives and outline those in that section, your objectives and performance measures. But you could put 0 in the target and actual sections, and then you would discuss the data in the explanation of progress section. But you could also provide your evaluation report, which should go into detail about that qualitative data. And then again, in that explanation of progress, discuss the data that you collected, how you collected it, how you analyzed it, and how it might be informing not only the impact of the grant, the success of your project, but if there's any changes or if you need to move forward in a different way, you can discuss that in the explanation of progress section too. What happens if we don't have much data available just yet? So I encourage you to report on all of your objectives and performance measures, including the ones you don't have data available just yet, so that we have a good foundation of what your evaluation plan is and your progress. For baseline data, again, you would put 999 in the target section, which indicates you are reporting baseline data. Perhaps you've collected that in your first year, or maybe you collected that prior to your grant starting. And then in the actual section, you would put the actual baseline data number that you collected. If you don't have data for certain performance measures just yet, you would enter any established targets from your grant application or your evaluation plan, and then you would enter 0 in the actual section. But again, in the explanation of progress section, you do want to provide a justification for any and all data that you include or have not collected just yet. As I mentioned, if you're having any troubles with the system, please don't hesitate to contact the HEPIS Help Desk under the Contact Us page. And then if you're having any content issues or if you have any content-related questions, you'd want to talk to your assigned program specialist. Is there a downloadable template to use in preparation for submission? Yes, so there is a great blank template on the Help tab of the HEPIS main page. So if you click on the HEPIS Help tab, you go down to the bottom under FIPSE resources. There is downloadable PDF copies of the APR if you want to work offline on each of those blank templates. Again, even if you're working offline, I would highly recommend that you at least make sure that you can log into the HEPIS system just in the case that there's any HEPIS systems issues or you need to create a new account. That way, when you go to log in and fill out your APR, you already have access to the system. This was a great question that was submitted. How much time should we plan to dedicate to completing this APR? My wonderful colleague Margarita provided a great explanation that it is hard to give an estimate because it really depends on the complexity of your goals and objectives and the availability of data and information at your institution or organization, especially when completing different sections of the report. Maybe you're working with your evaluator and your budget office. Or maybe you have to follow certain review and approval processes. So it's important to keep all that in mind and work with those different offices and collect that data as soon as possible. And especially if this is your first report, it does take quite a bit of time to get through your APR. It might not require as much time in the out years, but it is important to dedicate as much time as you can to the APR and be sure that you can collect all that data. How do we report on our goals and activities? So the goals are generally what you're trying to achieve with your overall project. It's sort of the why of your project, and activities are those things that are taking place during your grant to accomplish those goals. So perhaps you're developing curriculum, workshops, implementing student services, etc. And then you want to report on each of those activities, or maybe you have multiple activities associated to each objective. You want to talk about those under the corresponding objective. This may mean that you have an objective that can speak to multiple activities. You might also have performance measures that speak to multiple objectives. So it's important to include all of that information. And remember, the objectives are how you're quantifying the success of those activities towards meeting your project goals, and the performance measures are what you're using to measure whether or not you're meeting your objectives. So how successful is your project? Is it working as intended? And if not, how are you pivoting? And how is the target population benefiting from your project? And how are you impacting your students and community? Alrighty, so I think I saw a couple of questions in the chat, so I just want to make sure that I answer those. And yes, again, if you started your project this year on January 1st, you aren't filling out an APR, but I did include you in the invite for informational purposes. When the APR system opens for your APR next year, we will notify you as soon as possible. You'll typically be notified from the HEPA system, and you'll get an email from them. And then we'll notify you as program specialists and support you through filling that out. I see, I think Juanita and Jamie might have asked the same question. So yes, it typically opens around this time frame. So this is a good time frame to keep in mind. In my experience, it is opened in the April-May time frame each year. So if you want to get kind of work towards the APR and filling that out next year, this is a good time frame to keep in mind. Michael, should budget reporting align to the reporting period, or should it be to the date of submission? So yes, it should align to your reporting period. That's a great question. Alrighty, I think I got through all of the questions. If there is any other questions, please don't hesitate to let me know. Esther, that's a great suggestion about editable templates. I don't think that the PDF copy is editable, but one of my other grantees in HSI did recommend converting it to a Word document and that they were able to fill it out that way. For new grantees, if we create a HEPAS account and log in this year, but we don't have an APR due yet, will we see a pre-populated outline, or will our system be empty for this year? I don't think you'll have access to the APR just yet if you're not filling it out until next year, so it might not show up in your account, and that's just because it hasn't been added since you aren't filling out the APR just yet. Please feel free to put additional questions in the chat. I am just moving to our contact page so you have this information. Again, we have our wonderful FIPSE program leads, Dr. Robin Dabney for modeling and simulation, and Jerry Clark for basic needs, Jimmy Seward for gang involved youth, and then myself for open textbooks and our rural program. So we have our email addresses there as well as our phone numbers. So please feel free to contact us if you have any questions or need help filling out the APR. And Gina, yes, the deadline to submit the report is May 10th, 2024 at 11:59 p.m. Eastern Time. Is there any other questions in the chat? Please feel free to continue to put questions in the chat. Yeah, Jamie, so there is some blank templates on the HEPIS website. So you can go ahead and that's on the main page under the help tab. You can download the blank templates for the report if you wanted to get a head start. Alrighty, just want to make sure there's not any other questions. I am happy to stay on if there's additional questions since we have a bit of time, but I also don't want to hold you up. I know we have incredibly busy schedules, so I wanted to thank you all so much again for attending this webinar and taking time out of your busy days. I hope that this was helpful, and of course, we are here to support you, so don't hesitate to ask us for support. And I hope you all have a wonderful rest of your day, a wonderful week, and we will talk to you soon. Take care, everyone. Yes, Robin, we will be sending the slides this week, and then we'll be getting the recording posted on YouTube, hopefully, if not by the end of the week, beginning of next week. No problem, everyone. Have a wonderful rest of your day. Again, I am holding on. If there's any other questions, I'll hold on for a few minutes. So please feel free to put those in the chat. Yeah, no problem, everyone. And I just want to say thank you so much, Margarita, for all of your support and help with the chat. I really appreciate you supporting me and answering questions. Kim just wanted to double check if there's anything we should add to section C or elsewhere as part of closing out our grant. Oh, that's a great question, Kim. So I would definitely include that information in the additional information section. Just some general overview of the success of your grant and what the progress that you made towards achieving your goals and objectives and closing out your grant. And I can also send you some helpful questions. Angela confirming OTB had a longer reporting period last year. Sorry, I'm just going to go ahead and stop recording really quick.